Welcome back to Chazarah on Yerushalmi Peah. We're starting on Daf Mem Gimel. So we spoke about when you've got some crops which are next to a stack, and they're like a single shiboles that was left, where everything else was cut. This thing wasn't cut, but you can bend it to a big growing stack, a comma, which has not yet been cut. So the din is, if you can still gather it together with the comma, with the growing grain, and cut them together, then it's got a din of belonging to the owner of the field, and if not, it belongs to the poor. Now, if you have a piece of leket, let's say, which belongs to the poor, but it got mixed up with a stack of the owner of the field, now he can't start recognizing where's this leket now to give it to the poor. So you have to give to the poor, maybe another one instead, but you have to take master on it and then give it. And Rabbi said, well, it doesn't really belong to the poor yet. I mean, how can he swap something, the poor man, with something which is not yet his? He's got no right to it yet. Okay, we'll see a discussion about that. So what does he choose? He says, you know what? Give ownership of the whole stack to the poor person, and then take maaser on one piece and give him that. Okay, so we're in the Gemara here. So we're talking about a grain, standing grain, which saves a piece of a grain, of a standing grain which is next to it, which is something which was cut. Which was forgotten about. So we bring like Shibodesh because we're saying the top of it reaches the comma, providing the one which is forgotten is surrounded on all sides by a cut area which separates between that and the comma. So that's why it's a din of shikha. And the top of it reaches the growing grain, and it can be cut with it. If, however, it could be cut with the growing grain, but the growing grain can't be cut with it, it can still be saved.
Because it's only short.
It can be bent with it. Okay. If there were, let's say, two shibolim, two pieces that were forgotten, and one of them is close to this growing grain, and the inner one there still can be cut with the growing grain, but the outer one can only be cut with the inner one, but not with the growing grain. Then the inner one gets saved, and that also saves the outer one as well. Rabbi says, I remember I was involved with getting the olives with Rabbi, and he said, look, any olives tree that you can reach out and take, that's not shikha. Even though you finished cutting the olives, you've gone to another tree, if you're still within range that you can stretch out, that's not a case of shikha. Now Rabbi Yochanan comes along and says, if you've left the tree and you forgot about it, okay, you can stretch, but it is shikha. So we seem to go against Rav Oshia because we've got our case in our Mishnah, the shiboles, which is the top bit reaching the growing grain, and which one is cuts it. Now, surely you can reach out and take it. It's so close, and you can reach out and take it, and yet the Mishnah says it has to be cut with it. So it's not enough to you can just reach out. Even the fact that you can reach it out can still be shikha. So Rav said we're talking about different rows. It's in a different row. It's not in the same row as what you were dealing with. So therefore they had a different din. Now then we have this question, which we have a few times in Yerushalmi Peah, that something which was fitting to save and something got forgotten, can it become shikha again? So it was saved once. So it didn't have a din shikha because it was saved, let's say, through the comma that was next to it. Now can it be shikha now if it got forgotten again? And the Gemara brings a case of where you're collecting bundles, one row, two bundles, three bundles. You forgot the fourth one. Now remember, rows of three don't get forgotten. So if it's 4, 5, and 6, a row of 4, 5, 6 doesn't get forgotten. It doesn't have a din of shikha. So let's say you took the fifth one, then the fourth one becomes shikha. You've left out the fourth one. Some say if you had enough time to take the fifth one, then the fourth one becomes shikha. And Rabbi Bachir says the one who says you actually took the fifth one, that's if there's a sixth one. But if the one who says that you actually had the time to take the fifth one, but you didn't take it, that's to it. Well, there's no sixth one. So if there's no sixth one, you never had a row of 4, 5, 6. So therefore, the 4 and 5 don't have a din of a new row, but taking it is that basically you've moved on, you've jumped, you've missed out number 4, even though you're taking number 5, you've taken your mind off it, and it becomes shikha. Now, before you took number 5, number 4 was a din of being saved. It could have been in a row, because it was a row of 4, 5, and 6, and it could have been saved. But the fact is, later on, by the time you took number 5, that's it. That's the end, and number 4 doesn't get saved. So we see that something which was fitting to be saved and got forgotten, it doesn't mean it will never be forgotten. It can have shikha at a later date. Then we said something which could save and got forgotten, can it become shikha? So the one that was forgotten through, there might not be a din of shikha, because something could have been saved through the comma, but then you cut the comma and then you forgot to cut that which was forgotten with it. So now there's no comma saving it anymore. So can it become shikha now? Or do we say, well, look, it never became shikha first. It's similar din, really. It's the same question which we just had. But we don't bring in another proof about this question. Something was forgotten once, can it be forgotten again? So we talk about one sar of tavua. Now remember, 2 sar doesn't become shikha because it's a massive amount, right? So if you have 1 sar which is uprooted and 1 sar which is not, they don't join up for the shir of 2 sar. Now the uprooted one should save the not uprooted one. The one which is cut, rather, should be saved because of the one which is not cut, even though the comma which is not cut was forgotten, because it should be like 2 sars. So the Gemara says no, it can become shikha even if it was forgotten once. But then Rabbi Yoda is talking about a case where you're cutting 1 row, taking bundles of 1 row, and then you forgot. Basically, you'd already forgotten the growing grain before it had a chance to enable you to remember the other grain. Right, that was the case there. Turning to, we're now on Mem Daled Omid Base, 44b. Now we said if 1 shiboles of leket gets mixed up with the whole stack, then the owner should take out 1 shiboles, take meiser on it, and give it to the poor person. So how does he do it? So you bring 2, and you say, look, if this one's leket, that's fine. If this one is not leket, then my meiser should be on this second one, and then you can give him the first one. But then it says maybe the one you put maestros on, took maestros from, was a leket one, and that didn't need any maestros taken. So then Rabbi Yonah said that, you bring 2, and you say, look, if this one's leket, that's fine. If not, my maestros are on the second one, and then you give him one of them, and you give the first one, and and also you bring like a third one, basically. And you say if the first one is tevel, the second one's leket, and there's no din maestros of the first one, so the first maestros are on the third one. So by bringing extra ones, you'll cover yourself from any doubts. Now, Ravosa, the name of Rish Lakish, the din of the Tanakh, now a poor person can exchange his leket with another shiboles. He's never really acquired it, but he says it's like the view of Rabbi Yossi, that sometimes we say, look, you've not acquired something, it's as if you've acquired it. So although he's not done any Masechet to acquire the leket, right, but we're lenient and we give it to him in order to swap it for another one which the Balabais gives him. I bring a proof for this. It's talking about a case where a person has 2 animals. One is Bechar, a Bechar animal. We don't know which one is the Bechar. They're both holy, they're out of doubt. The Yisrael only has to give the Kohen one of them. The second one he can keep for himself. When he shechs it, let's say after there's a blemish, do you have to give the Kohen the matanos, right? The Zorah Chaim Keva or not? Like every cholin animal, or maybe it's potter from matanos with safek bechar. Now Rabbi Yossi potters from giving the matanos for a kohen, because Rabbi Yossi says, look, if a kohen's involved, you're potter from matanos. If a kohen has a hand in it, that he took it, let's say for a safek bechar, b'yad Yisrael, the animal in Yisrael's hand is potter from matanos. So here, if the kohen receives from Yisrael one of the 2 animals, for the sake of whichever animal we have a doubt about, then the Yisrael's animal is also potter from the gifts. The mayor obligates the owner Yisrael to give the gifts to the Kohen, because now according to Rabbi Yossi, you're not acquired it as if you've acquired it. So we treat it as if the Kohen first acquired the Bechar, and then we're swapping it round, and that's why he's given up on his right to the Bechar. So it's the same thing here. The poor person never acquired the leket, but we treat it as if he acquired it, right? And they gave him the ability to swap it with the Shabbat that he gave. Rabbi comes along and says, according to Rabbi Yossi, you need to give it to a Kohen, give to a Kohen the right, wherever it is, for a Maisa Kinyan. If he acquires the firstborn, right, and then he takes one of the 2 for what he's got, then it's as if he's had a chalipin in the hands of the Kohen, and then Yisrael doesn't have to give the matanos. Okay. Rabbi Yossi Bazvida, he said, Rabbi is arguing on Rish Lakish because we've learned, Rabbi Lazar says, look, how is this poor person getting a shiboles from something he's never acquired it? So according to Rabbi, you've got to give him an amount in the whole stack, and then you give him one out of that, right? You've got to give him the whole thing. So Rabbi says, according to Rabbi Yossi, the 2 animals, you've got to have a kohen, have a chelek in it first, right, to exempt you from the matanos. But it's not as if we don't say as if you've not acquired the whole thing. Basically, we're not like Rabbi Yossi, because the Tanakama holds we do treat him as he's not acquired it as if he's acquired it. According to Rabbi Yossi, he doesn't say that with Bechar. Just one second, I'll explain this a bit better. the owner of the field, you got to give the Oni a share in the whole Godish, according to that opinion, according to Rabbi Lezer, right? In order to get his one leket, he has to acquire the whole thing, okay? And then you can swap it and give him another one. So therefore so according to the Tanakama who argue, you don't have to give him the whole you only have to give him one, that one shibolis within the stack. Which Lakish learned that according to the Tanakama is like Rabbi Yossi B'Chayros, that you've not acquired it as if you've acquired it. So although the poor person has not acquired the shibolis haleket to swap it for another, we treat it as if he's zocher in it. But Rabbi Bar can't equate the Tanakama with Rabbi Yossi. So it depends as to how far we can equate the Tanakama with Rabbi Yossi. Okay? And Rabbi Bar, however, said, according to Rabbi Yossi, you need to actually give it to the Kohen. So that's not like Rabbi Yossi. The Tanakama in our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yossi. Tanakama holds, we treat him as if you've not acquired, as if you acquired it. But Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold that with B'chor. The Kohen has to have an involvement with it. So Rabbi Bar argues on the Shlokish, who equated the Tanakama with the view of Rabbi Yossi. Then Rabbi Mana comes along and says, no, this whole Mishnah, which says that the Tanakama is indeed the view of Rabbi Yossi, and the way Rabbi explained it, okay, Tanakama don't need a kinyan, but Rabbi Lezer, he's arguing, he stresses you need to give him the whole stack. So even according to the Tanakama, the owner of the field has to give him something. You have to be maknes something. For him to get a share of this shiboles, right? You have to be makne to him before you start swapping it around. So it could be the Tanakama holds that we don't treat the Oni, you don't have to give him the whole stack, but you have to give him one. And the other Tana, which is Rabbi Lezer, holds, in order to swap around, you don't have to give him just one. It's not enough to just give him one. You have to give him the whole stack. So everyone agrees you do need to give him something. If he's not acquired anything, then he hasn't got any right to start getting another one in his place, okay? Now also, the Tanakama hold, look, if you give him the whole thing, it doesn't help. Because he holds as if you're giving like from your right to your left. It's not really a proper thing. You can't start giving him the whole thing and taking it back again. You can't to take it back away. It doesn't work like that. But the other Tana might hold, Rabbi Lezer might hold, no, it's not going from your right to left. It is a proper right. I'm giving you the whole stack, but then I'm going to take it away and just leave you with one. That does work. Okay. We have actually contradictions with Rabbi Lezer. Elsewhere he says that a rich person who took leket, shikhaper for an oni, he's acquired it. Here he's saying that the oni has to acquire the godish in order to get the leket, which has got mixed in. Why we don't say that you have to give him? Why can't the rich person himself acquire the leket for the poor person? Why does the oni have to acquire it? So the answer was that he was speaking. Rabbi was speaking to the chachamim. He's not saying his own view at all. He's telling the chachamim that according to, as far as I'm concerned, a rich person can take leket for the poor. But so I understand, how I can give it to the poor, one shiboles for the one that got mixed up. I can be mezakeh the whole thing for a poor person. But according to you, that a rich person can't start giving leket for a poor person, and therefore the only way to do it is to give him a share through chilupin. And how can he do it when it's not yet his? So that's what he was saying back to them. Okay, we're up to Daf Memvav, yeah? So ein megalgel mitafach. So this is about watering a field till it's a bit dry before they've started taking their leket. What? Yeah, halacha gimel. Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to stop it?
No, we carry on. Ein megalgel mitafach. So what are we talking about here? Don't start irrigating a field before they've taken their leket. It gets hard. That's the view of Rameh. Chachamim allow it because you can work out a damage that's caused for the poor and you can appease them with a certain amount. So we've learned about if you're starting to sprinkle water and things on your field before the poor people have gone in. So if there's damage, more of the poor person's losing out by delaying. If you lose out by delaying the irrigating more than the damage caused to the poor, then fair enough. But if the damage to the poor is more, you shouldn't do it. Rabbi Yehuda said, whatever happens, you can do it. And then whatever you do, you take the leket, put it on the geder, on the fence, and the poor person will take. Again, we have a contradiction of Yehuda. Elsewhere we've said, you want to start pruning your vines. You can do that on your own. You can do that with the vines of the poor as well. You don't have to worry about the losses of the poor. And here he says that you should push the irrigating to prevent loss for the poor. So the one answers over there that they caused this, so they should have come at the right time, and they never came, right? So you don't have to delay everything too much. But here, the people came. In the case of leket, the aniyim, they didn't do anything wrong. They came to get the leket as soon as it was there, and you want to start irrigating your field. And again, you're preventing them from gathering the leket. So Rabbi Yehuda says you have to start collecting the leket for them and put it on the fence. We have a contradiction in the Rabbanon. Elsewhere we said, if the damage is more than for the poor person, then don't do the water. If it's damage is more for the poor, whatever, you're allowed to do the water. Depends which way the damage is more. But here, we're saying those who allow you to irrigate your fields, regardless whether the damage is more or less, whatever, you can just irrigate. So one says, well, here, over there in the Brisa, we're talking about a case where you can't obligate the Balabais to pay with the damages. And they said it depends which one, whose the damage is more. But here, we're talking about a case where you can obligate damages for that which is caused. The Chacham said, so the owner of the field is allowed to irrigate his field, providing he reaches an amount that he understands that they're losing as a result. Now, Rabbi was the one who said that you can't start irrigating the field before they start taking their leket. Now, we look at the losses of the balabais, we look at the loss caused by delaying it, and you can get that loss from the poor. Now, Rabbanan are saying that you are allowed to irrigate the field before they take their leket. And we look at the poor people, look at the loss that's caused as a result of the irrigating, and the owner of the field is to pay the poor. So, if that's the case, which poor are you going to pay to? Who are you going to pay for any losses caused? So Rabbi Yonah said to the poor people in the town, because otherwise, what would it have been? Of course it should be in that class. Where else are you going to pay? So he says, well, his din is to tell you that the poor is me'ikar din. It's not just chasidus, right? That's why you have to pay for the poor people in that town. Halacha daled, a balabais who hasn't got a din of an oni, he's not allowed to take any gifts. He was going from place to place, and you need to take leket trikha peah master oni. Then he's going on he's going on a journey. He's got no money, right? So he's allowed to take various things. He can take. When he comes back home, then he should pay back what he's taken from the poor. That's Rav Lezer's view. The Chacham said, no, he was poor at that time. He doesn't have to pay back. If a balabais is swapping his tevel fruit with peris of leket trikha peah of the poor, then b'shaloi potter, he's potter from the mafresh trumas and maestros from the fruit which is now his, because they were like leket trikha peah, they're potter from maestros. But he is chayav to separate trumas and maestros from the tevel which he gives to the aniyim of his own. Before he gives it, he has to separate trumas and maestros. The two people take on a field as an oris, arisus, and they take they're sharecroppers, they're partners in the field. Then they cannot take for themselves the master ani which they are separating, but each one can give each one share to the other one. And that way they can each get from each other if they are valid, if they're able to do that. One who takes on a field to cut from the produce, he'll get a share. He becomes a partner in the field. He still can't take leket trikha peah master ani. Rabbi Yehuda said that's if he's got it, let's say a half, a third, a quarter. But if the owner said, look, whatever third of what you cut will be yours, then he's allowed to get leket at least, trikha peah. Why? If he's poor, but he can't get master ani, because their obligations came earlier, and he's going to get what he cuts, right? So some things he can have. So a father and a son, or people of family, two brothers, two partners, they can redeem each other's master sheni without adding a fifth. They can give each other master ani, but Rabbi Yehuda says, well, don't start giving master ani to one's father. That's not very good. But they said maybe they were both poor, and therefore he can do it. Rabbi Yehuda said that when, let's say you get a third or a half or a quarter, but if you say a third of what I cut will be yours, then the oris is permitted to have the leket trikha peah. They can't have the master ani. What difference is there if he says a third of what you cut, as opposed to the usual fractions that he cuts? He says the difference is when you cut, a third of what you cut will be yours. So therefore the oris has no partnership in the field with the produce. So the leket trikha peah he can take for himself. They're not chal on the oris. Now we said if a person cuts, let's say, half his field and then he sells half, so the one who buys it has to separate peah for the whole field, right? Even for the bit that was cut first, and for the seller's bit that he's cut. What about a seller as far as peah? Can the seller take the peah for himself if he's poor? Do we say, look, this peah is given from the share of the buyer, therefore the buyer is the owner of the field? Or maybe no, this peah is also for the seller as well, so he's considered the owner of the field, and therefore he can't take the peah. So Rabbi Barbun says that the din of Rabbi Yehuda tells me that if you get your share only after it's been cut, means you can take manas haniyim from the field. You're not the balabais, even though this peah was pattered with that produce. What we're saying is one who sells is allowed to get the peah, which allows the bundles. So the person who cut part of the produce and then sold the field to someone else is allowed to take the peah which is left, which the lekach leaves there in the field if he's a poor person. We don't say, look, this peah patters from Chalas peah, so also the Ibrahim and so on is considered, you're not considered the owner. So basically you're not considered the owner of the field. Now Yosef Ibn, however, argued, he said, look, your field was chayav with peah while it was still yours. So it's not the same case. Whereas here, the field of the Oris is not chayav peah when he had it, because he never acquired the actual element of the field. He didn't get the produce until after it's got cut. So the chiyuv to separate peah is only on the owner of the field, and when he separates peah, he does it to fulfill his duty. So din Rabbi Yehuda that Oris can be mezakim matalas aniyim is not really it's not the same question at all to the question that we had. Okay, Rabbi Bar Nagri said the din of leket shikha peah. Well, we said the owner, a third of what you cut will be yours. You're allowed to take from the field leket shikha peah, but you can't start taking masa ani. So why is masa ani different leket shikha peah? Because leket shikha peah, you're meant to leave them at the time of the cutting. The Oris has no partnership with them, so he's allowed to take these matanas. But masa ani is straight after cutting with the gemar malacha of the crop, and then the Oris has already had his share. So therefore, he's not allowed to take it for himself. Okay.